So welcome, everybody. It is a real pleasure to see you all tonight and have you here. As many of you know, the Caregiver Support Program of the Dementia Care Collaborative was started at Mass General Hospital in 2017. And we are part of the Palliative Care and Geriatric Medicine Division. As many of you also know, the mission of our program is to transform memory care. We exist at Mass General to educate, create connections and a sense of community, and provide support. Patients, caregivers, clinicians, everyone is welcome to our program. We offer care consultations to caregivers and patients in specific Mass General clinics, skills classes for caregivers, support groups, and health and resiliency programming. If you're not yet on our mailing list, please see Judy Willett's email address in chat and just put in your email address or let her know or email her, and you'll receive all of our future messages. Finally, the Caregiver Support Program is entirely funded through philanthropy. If you are interested in learning how to support or donate to our program, please reach out to any of us on the team. Thank you. And now I have the spectacular pleasure of introducing our speaker. Many of us have heard, I've heard for years, what's good for your heart is good for your brain. And tonight we have one of the international experts in what's good for our brain through our eating. Dr. Nancy Emerson Lombardo has worked for over 35 years in Alzheimer's disease and services for older adults. She's a co-founder of the National Alzheimer's Association and Alzheimer's Disease International. As president of the Brain Health and Wellness Center and Healthcare Insights, she has developed brain healthy lifestyle interventions, including the Memory Preservation Nutrition Program, MPN, and that's what we'll learn about tonight. The MPN is implemented in several assisted living communities, the Houston's Amazing Place Adult Day Program for people with dementia, and elsewhere. Dr. Emerson Lombardo is available for private consultations to individuals, families, and organizations, as well as for presentations to both lay and professional audiences. Finally, Dr. Emerson Lombardo is also an adjunct research assistant professor of neurology at Boston University School of Medicine, where she is a faculty member of the BU Alzheimer's Disease Center. It is with tremendous excitement, and it's a great honor to welcome you, Nancy. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Wow. It's a lovely introduction, and I have had such pleasure working with a fabulous team at Mass General. I'm just pleased that your care consortium has been created and that you have such talented people. It's been a pleasure working with each and every one of you. Well, as we are acquainted with, those who know me know that I like to tell stories, and I sometimes talk past my time limit, so I'm really dedicated to giving you a lot of information in 50 minutes and then leaving time for questions and answers, and put some of my stories aside. And this talk tonight is focused. Now that's funny. I'm not able to advance my slides. What happened here? They were advancing before when I didn't even try. Let me see. This is, I've never had this happen before.
That's the way it always happens.
There it is.
There it is.
Well, yeah, but it was, now it's working. There must have been just a little freeze.
It always
it was
happens.
A brain freeze or something. No, it was a laptop freeze. Okay, so what I'm trying to do, the main important audience tonight, as I understand it, are the families and caregivers that work with MGH. Now, some of the other participants may be providers or scientists or family members A lot of my family is dealing with Alzheimer's or has in the past. So the research details are available to you through my website. We have a longer version of the talk tonight that'll be accessible to you on the website. So we're trying to like get across the main important points. And I hope one of my goals, our goal in general, of course, is to have more resilient brains. But my goal tonight is to share some essential information and hopefully give you some incentive for making strides yourself to protect yourself and those that you love. If you're caring for somebody who already has dementia, then there's a lot you can do for them. But as a caregiver and family member, you also need to take care of yourself so you're there for the people you're taking care of. So overall, our basic goal is to develop a more healthy brain so that whatever happens in our life, we have more resiliency to overcome it or resist any problems that we come into. Now, these can be one of the biggest risk factors for disease in the brain is age. So just like your muscles, you can exercise your brain to keep it strong and you can feed it right. Some of us have more genetic vulnerabilities than others. There's environmental stresses that we're still learning about. There was a recent study, every so often you'll see a study come out about geography, where we live. Is it pollution in the air from industrialization or something else that is a problem? We can have an accident that does some injury to our brain and makes us vulnerable. And certainly there are toxins, including certain anesthesias. When you're having surgery and you're older, you need to ask them to use the safe anesthesias. And now we're also learning that there are microbes possibly invading the brain and living there for decades waiting to come into action. So there's lots of reasons why we want resilient brain tissue. And the thing that we've been learning a lot about in the last, I would say the last decade especially, but the last 20 years, is how important lifestyles are to help us actually enhance and strengthen our brain neurons, the synapses and dendrites, the different parts of connecting, and other body and brain cells relevant to brain health. And it's the same lifestyles that often help our brain directly as well as the rest of our body in supporting our brain. It includes nutrition, exercise, cognitive training, sleep, and others. But that's the subject for another talk. And all of these things also help boost our immune system. Now, one thing that's very important to keep in mind, and I have to take care of something, okay, is that Alzheimer's disease takes 2 or 3 decades to develop. That's was kind of startling when we first learned about that, about I think 10 or 15 years ago now. But it helps you understand why the potential for lifestyle. If what's going on in our brain that eventually leads to dementia or Alzheimer, full-blown Alzheimer's dementia takes 20 or 30 years, well, we got lots of time to intervene. But also, would you want to be, even if we discovered a medication that if you took it like an infusion once a month for the rest of your life, would you want to do that? Could you afford it? Probably not. So lifestyle is going to be very important. Now, there are many factors that affect our brains and condition risk. Many of them are chronic conditions. Like we found that every single aspect of cardiovascular disease, whether it's high blood pressure or other things, can be a risk factor for brain disease, especially Alzheimer's. And the one medication that actually has been shown to slow down Alzheimer's and reduce your risk is aggressive management of blood pressure to 120 to 130 instead of what we used to aim at 140 or below. So you can decrease your risk of mild cognitive impairment by 20%, but it reduce your risk of getting Alzheimer's if you already have mild cognitive impairment. And then there's pre-diabetes and insulin resistance, as well as full-blown diabetes. The brain actually has its own supply of insulin, and it lives on sugar for its main energy. And it turns out that if you screw up your sugar balance in your body and your brain, you're putting your brain at grave risk. You'll hear a lot more about that as we go on. Then there's other basic destructive processes that are very much related to what we eat and whether we exercise, and that's inflammation and oxidative stress. Either one or both of those processes can speed up tremendously the deterioration in your brain. So maintaining healthy brain tissue is a goal not only for each of us, but for anyone who already has Alzheimer's disease. People don't realize, yes, they've lost some brain cells by the time you know something is seriously wrong, but they have many remaining healthy brain cells, and they're creating new ones all the time. That's part of another story, but every time you exercise physically and do aerobics and resistance training, you are actually creating new brain cells at a faster rate in the hippocampus especially, which is the seat of our memory. So it's very important that we have proper nutrition, exercise, and other healthy lifestyles. It actually helps us build the new neurons, and as well as the connecting parts. Keeps the whole brain cell healthy, and we want to use this when we already have a problem, the slow progression. And I'll be showing you that scientific study shows that nutrition and exercise actually slows progression, though not exercise tonight. And it helps, of course, then the caregiver and the family as well, because you'll hear the same kind of good, healthy diets very much affect your mood and help lower rates of anxiety and depression, as well as protect your cognition. Now, this is one of my favorite slides. It hints at some of the other healthy lifestyles, which maybe we'll have an opportunity to talk about in the future. But these two pictures right here, this is down here is one of my displays of a healthy vegetables and fruits. But these two illustrate how, if you think about it, you can have a certain lifestyle activity that is, I call it a 2 or 3 or 4-fer. So over here you have a couple dancing. They're in Singapore, and dancing is social, so you're socially engaged. That helps our brain health, both cognitively and mood-wise. They're moving physically, they're listening to music, they're having fun. So all of those things are really helping their brain. Now, this picture is of my twin brother, Michael. I love this picture. Now, what he's holding is a salmon. Now, we know eating salmon and fish is really great for our brain. Smiling and being happy turns out to be great. Being out in nature. Now, you're thinking, well, what about exercise? Well, fly fishing, you're exercising your arms and you're doing an awful lot of hiking to get out there into the wilderness. And on top of that, it's social. You only see him, but who's taking the picture? So just keep that in mind, and humor is part of it. But that's, again, those details are for another time. So why brain healthy nutrition? We think that even with just nutrition, we can do many things. One is, if we could delay, and a lot of us think we can, delay the onset of Alzheimer's by 5 years, all by itself, it would cut prevalence in half, because of the fact that Alzheimer's doubles every 5 years after you're 65. And at the same time, it can slow the progression of cognitive impairment, whether you already have a mild cognitive impairment or Alzheimer's disease, or it's building up subtly before you have any symptoms. It can help with stroke, and it can help perhaps prevent or slow progression of other dementias. And then at the same time, the great thing about nutrition, it's improving your overall health, the quality of your life, and longevity for everyone. And the same great foods that are wonderful for the brain are great for the body. Now, I just want to call your attention to the food pyramid over here. It's the African food pyramid created by Old Ways Trust, which is right here in Boston. They wanted to show different ethnic groups. If you return to your traditional diet, whatever your background, you are going to be doing way better than eating what Americans typically eat. And you'll be hearing more about why these particular foods, but why I think the African food pyramid, which of course nobody right now is researching for brain health, but what we're learning, and you'll be hearing the details, is leafy greens every day is a great goal. You should really do this if you're not already. That's part of the African heritage diet. And then the next big volume of food you should be eating are all these wonderful plant foods. You've got vegetables, you've got onions and garlic. They're great for multiple ways, peanuts and nuts, beans and peas, fresh peas and beans as well as dried. And then all your various fruits of all different kinds, whole grains, and then your different kinds of, in the African diet, tubers are also very important. There's some disagreement among some brain diets about whether that's great or not, but in the overall picture, they're fine. And then what makes this really especially brain healthy, in my opinion, is this whole emphasis here on herbs, spices, and traditional sauces. You'll be hearing more about that. And then fish and seafood, almost every healthy diet agrees of all the animal type proteins, this should be your biggest source, fish and seafood. And then all the other kinds of animal food should be of a more modest, but especially red meats are the worst. But eggs and chicken and poultry are just fine. And then you need healthy oils, and we'll be talking about what those are. And then you should have, having some dairy is okay, but a smaller amount and low fat. And then the smallest amount, everybody totally agrees on this, the least important food and the most toxic one for you are your sweets. And we'll be sharing why that is. And it's sad news to share with you, but look at all these other wonderful foods. And one thing I want to say more than once, every healthy food that has a real, we're not saying artificial, but any healthy whole food that has a strong flavor or a strong color, in strong flavors and strong colors, turns out those are key antioxidants that we're still learning about. But eat color and eat flavor, other than the flavors you want to avoid would be sugar type flavors and certain meat flavors. But in terms of plant-based foods, go for flavor and go for color. Of course, sugar is a plant-based food, but it is an exception. It is not good for us. So we have to control how much we eat. I got to move along here. So memory preservation nutrition is science-based, and it's based on hundreds of studies. One thing we've learned over the years that individual foods and nutrients, they're more likely to hinder. One particular food or nutrient is probably not potent enough to help our brains. A food like sugar is potent enough to hinder our brain function. And the same goes with red meat, as you'll be seeing. The different kinds of food and nutrients that are good for us, how we find out about them is multiple ways. One, we do studies with mice and pinpoint certain nutrients or types of foods. And then the other way is we do what are called case control studies. We follow people over time. We ask them what they eat, and then we look years later to see which diets seem to be related to lower risk of getting cognitive problems, Alzheimer's, or other diseases. Then that only gives us a hint of what is seems to be associated with better health or brain health. To prove it, we need to do clinical trials where you start everybody even, it's randomized. Some people get an intervention, some people don't, or have a placebo. And that's a clinical trial, randomized. That is the gold standard. And luckily, by now, we have some gold standard trials that tell us which direction to go in. And then what's really neat, we found is combination of foods to have enough potency, and foods actually help each other be healthy. It's called synergy. Now, one of the sets of studies that really kicked this whole area of work off was done at Columbia Alzheimer Disease Center. And it was inspired by a Greek doctor who is he spent some of his time there as well as in Greece. And he was convinced that the Greek and vegetarian diet was going to be really great for the brain. And he invented a way of showing this in one of these cohort or association type styles. It was a point system, which later on other scientists adopted to compare their diets with this one. And he was able to show rather dramatically that people who followed a Mediterranean style diet reduced their risk of Alzheimer's by 40%. And that's a lot. It also lowered the risk of conversion from mild cognitive impairment to Alzheimer's. Now, you might be very familiar what's in a Mediterranean diet and what isn't. And by the way, he did it in people that were not of Mediterranean heritage. It's not your heritage, it's what you eat. So the people in the study, they included African Americans, people from Central America, South America, the Caribbean, all over Europe. Only a few were actually Mediterranean, but the foods that he looked for were lots of vegetables, fruit, fish, at least twice a week, maybe 3 times a week. Olive oil is your main source of fat for salads and cooking. Nuts and seeds several times a week or every day. Beans several times a week. Whole grains as your main type of grain that you eat. And then red wine, 1 or 2 glasses a day, but not more. If you have enough alcohol to feel it, then you're probably hurting your brain, not helping it, because it's actually the other elements in the red wine and that it's a fermented product. And then at the same time, low intakes of high-fat animal foods such as dairy, red meat, organ meat, and butter, and lower intake of saturated fats and omega-6s. Later on, people who love the DASH diet used a point system were able to show in a similar way that it also lowers the risk of dementia. Now, he also, this team at Columbia were able to show, they only had, I think, 200 people with Alzheimer's in the study at the time, and they were able to show that folks that had a moderate adherence to the Mediterranean diet extended their life by over a year, and closer adherence extended their life by almost 4 years. They didn't have enough people to absolutely show that their cognition was also slow, the decline was slowing down, but they believed that that was going on. And now with later information that I'll share with you in a minute, we think that is indeed what was happening here. So indeed, if you're taking care of people who already have Alzheimer's or cognitive impairment, it is not too late to help slow things down. Okay, now clinical trials, as I said, are the gold standard. They've been happening just really the past decade. The first trials they were trying to do, because it's really, really hard to get funded for a whole foods diet-based trial. Everybody's funding trials based on medicine, like a single pharmaceutical. Now, even in pharmacy, they're looking at combination therapy. So the very first ones, they were only looking at single types of nutrients like B vitamins and or fish oil. Well, it wasn't and, it was or. And the problem was single nutrients, they sometimes would get a hint, yes, positive things are happening. Other studies weren't so sure, but it was because they were looking at single nutrients. The pilot clinical trials with more complex single nutrients were actually more promising, such as particular herbs and spices, but they were never done in large enough numbers to be able to recommend them to people. But I've adopted herbs and spices, as I've already said, for my program. Now, other studies show that high glycemic index foods are very bad for the brain and memory, not just for your blood sugar system, but directly bad for your brain and memory. And then the first Whole Foods dietary trial reported just a little over 5 years ago. I'll be sharing with you a little bit. And then the blockbuster clinical trial with different kinds of brain healthy lifestyles reported 6 years ago. And they used the Nordic diet as opposed to the Mediterranean diet. So that's just a preview. It's not just, it's eating healthy foods, and there are various versions of it.
Next slide, please.
Okay.
Nancy.
And we got to move along here. So this slide shows that some of the mechanisms about how herbs and spices help us. They're potent antioxidants. They're anti-inflammatory. They have a positive impact on our blood sugar. They help lower your cholesterol, and they all fight microbes. So if microbes turn out to play a role in the etiology of Alzheimer's, eat more spices. Ginger's antiviral, and cinnamon kills different bacteria. So different spices do different things. And here's a list of some of the anti-inflammatory agents, but we'll be covering that more a little later. The higher the ORAC means, the higher the antioxidant content, the more likely they are to reduce the excessive levels of beta amyloid, one of the problem pathologies that build up in the brain of Alzheimer patients and can lead to Alzheimer's. So that just gives you a hint. And they do so much more. The beautiful thing about whole foods is we keep finding out one good food can do 10 to 100 good things for you. Now, this one is just fun. It's honoring my dad and my brother, Michael, but have hot peppers to add spice to your life. It turns out the hotter the pepper, the more they cool the flames within you. But it does aggravate GERD, which some of us have to deal with. So I can't personally eat as many hot peppers as I used to, but I still try to include them in many of my foods that I cook. And recently, this month, it turns out that hot chili peppers also extend life. Again, this is an association study. They did not do a clinical trial, but it's pretty dramatic. Reduced all-cause mortality by 25%. And again, while they're looking at capsicum, because that's the heat within the chili pepper, if you look at other studies, there's so many other wonderful nutrients and plant antioxidants that are probably as responsible for it as capsicum. The anti-inflammatory action of hot peppers is really key. Okay, now the first gold standard randomized clinical trial to prove that healthier diet improves thinking and memory happened in Spain and reported just beginning about 8 years ago. And the take-home message here is that a Mediterranean diet not only reduced first-time incident of heart attacks and strokes by 30%, and this is people who were on all the meds that you could have for high cholesterol or high blood pressure. And in addition, it helped improve thinking and memory. And then further, what it was adding more fish and legumes to the diet. They gave people either free olive oil or free nuts. Take home message, if you give people free food, they eat it, and it improves their diet. And the subtle thing was that the olive oil improved executive function part of thinking, and the nuts seemed to have more of an impact on memory. So these foods all are very helpful, but you want to eat a variety because each food is a star in a little different way. Now this study, I won't go into the details, but basically what we needed, we already showed the association. Clinical trials shows the impact. Now you want to know, when it comes to Alzheimer's, is the foods actually slowing down the pathology in the brain? And this study, we were able to image the amount of A-beta in the brain. And this study showed that people who followed more closely the Mediterranean diet, using the same point system as the earlier study in Colombia showed you, people at baseline had a lower buildup of A beta in their brain, and then they followed people for 3 years, and they found out that over that 3 years, the rate of buildup was also slowest in those with most closely adhering to the Mediterranean diet. That is very exciting. And they looked at individual foods, and there was only one that actually showed significant results independently. And unfortunately for all you red meat lovers, it was red meat. It's a real problem. So the slower buildup was for those people who ate the lowest amounts of red meat. And we don't know all the reasons red meat keeps coming up as a problem. It's not just the saturated fat. There's something about maybe it leads to more bacteria in the gut, and it definitely leads to more beta amyloid building up in the brain. So stay tuned. Now, one of the most popular brain healthy diets in the last 10 years or last 5 years has been the MIND diet, as people learn about it. It was developed by Martha Claire Morris out in Chicago. It's an acronym. What she did was combine elements of the Mediterranean diet in the DASH diet and came up with this diet, but she was really looking, she's our foremost epidemiologist in the whole world actually, and about foods and brain health. And she's been tireless looking at first one food, then another, then another, then another. And this was her breakout move to look at combinations of food. These are some of the foods you can see on the slide. You've been hearing about them as part of the Mediterranean diet, but she started noticing, as had I, that leafy greens seem to be a star among the vegetables, and berries seem to be the star among the fruits. That doesn't mean other vegetables and other fruits aren't important for the brain, but these are stars. And then she also concluded some of the same foods I already outlined for the Mediterranean diet. And again, limit the consumption of red meat, butter, margarine, and processed foods, especially desserts. Now, the one thing that was missing when Nick Skarmeas did his Mediterranean diet study, he didn't think to include a point for sugar, like little sugar. So that came for others to put into their diets. And I am sad to say that, well, I was glad to say Martha Claire Morris's MIND diet was the first total foods nutrition program to be funded for brain health. And it's ongoing here in Boston and Chicago. And it will report its results next year. The sad thing is Martha Claire Morris died in February, just after another blockbuster study was published. And she died of cancer. She's only 64, and it was really sad. Her legacy will live on because so many of us admire her and loved her, and she's a very humble, wonderful person. And her MIND diet is part of the US Pointer study, which is our US-based multiple healthy lifestyle intervention that's ongoing today. Another person I admire and recommend to you is follow this guy. He's not so much a researcher as he is a practitioner. He has published books. He's at Cornell Weill School of Medicine with an Alzheimer prevention clinic. I think it was the first clinic with prevention in the title. And Richard Isaacson, he's I think 2.5 decades younger than me. I think he's probably about 50 now. And I love it that he's young and got many decades to work. He loves the work I'm doing, that Martha Claire Morris was doing, and all the others in this field. And he has this phrase, you will remember this. If you want to take a fast train to Alzheimer's disease, just eat lots of sugar. He said that in an interview with Maria Shriver. And you can ask me questions about what he means by fasting instead of coconut oil if you're interested in exploring ketosis.
Next slides, please.
Yeah. So the other point I wanted to leave with you, I'd give you a preface of it. The same kind of healthy diet will help your mood. And these studies were done in Australia, just reporting a couple of years ago. Well, to see the significant effects for cognition can take several years. And for mood, you can see the results in just 3 to 6 months. And it can actually cost you less. And it's very important that you as a caregiver take care of yourself as well as the person that you're working with. Okay, now, this is a future for future research. I won't pause about this, but I hope someday somebody will research the African heritage diet. And there's so many details that we don't know, like exactly how much sugar is still safe to eat, how do foods help if Alzheimer's an autoimmune disease, and much more details about probiotics and prebiotics. Okay, now my program, it's evidence-based, it's easy to follow, it's flexible, any type of cuisine or culture could follow it, and it's customizable to meet individual tastes. These are the 7 principles that come right out of the data I just shared with you. And I'm not going to dwell on this slide because I've got the details here. So in general, we want to eat whole foods, not processed foods. You're hearing these things now are being said by lots of people. I was one of the first to lay this out, but it's a team action out there. The more plant foods, fewer animal foods. Fish or seafood a minimum of 3 times a week. Reduce all forms of sugar and refined carbs, especially desserts. There are ways to deal with it. Smaller amounts of less frequent and less sugar in the dessert. Eat fruit instead. Avoid trans fats and high fructose corn syrup. You got to read the food labels, unfortunately. Spices, leafy greens, nuts and seeds, omegas, whole grains every day. At the end of the program, I've got a slide that gives you the whole goals and what kinds of foods, how many times a week. And then how do we maintain a healthy gut? Pickles, probiotics, prebiotics. That's kind of the newer area of research. And then consuming 3 meals a day with 1 or 2 snacks and keep hydrated. The key to brain health is antioxidants. They play a major role in brain cell deterioration, Alzheimer pathology, dementia symptoms, and risk. Every oxidant-rich food tested in Alzheimer mice led to better thinking and reduced beta amyloid. So imagine if you eat lots of them. And then your brain cells are actually very delicate, and you want to prevent them from oxidizing. That hastens their demise. And then you want to improve blood sugar and lipids. All your plant foods help you do that. As I mentioned, leafy greens is a real star. Spices and herbs are the other stars, and berries. All vegetables, eat more than fruit. Vegetables, lots of people like to eat fruit because it's sweet. But actually, it's vegetables that are more important for your brain healthy diet. And then whole grains. Really, it's not that hard to switch to whole grains at practically every grain that you eat. And one recommendation I saw is go for 70% during the day, whole grains. And then you can have fun exploring whole grains that used to be popular and had fallen out of use. And they're also gluten-free, like sorghum. Is full of antioxidants. It's sweet tasting naturally without sugar. Berries, already mentioned, there's so many good things they do for us. They're anti-inflammatory. They help our brain cells talk to each other, but it's that bright, dense color. They're loaded with these flavonols that are so good for us. And then tea, coffee, and chocolate. Of the 3 items, tea is probably the healthiest for our brain, but chocolate's a close second. I like coffee. It's also good for us, but not as good as tea. And then dried beans and lentils, prebiotics, a healthy gut. As I said, lots of foods do more than one thing for us. Nuts and seeds, an ounce a day. Spices and herbs, I won't dwell on this other than to list the ones that are anti-inflammatory. Besides hot peppers, it's turmeric, ginger, oregano, rosemary, aloe vera, and there are many others. And again, spices do so many good things for us. So less sugar in your food, less salt in your food, because that affects your blood sugar and other things, and put more spices. That'll help you have very flavorful foods. And this slides just repeat some of that. Now, if you, I have to watch my time. I have 15 minutes left. And if one message, besides the idea, eat lots of healthy foods that are full of color and flavor, that's one message. The other is you must reduce your intake of sugar and refined carbs. They are so dangerous for our brain as well as our body and our hearts. Sugar consumption, this slide shows you how much sugar consumption has gone up an astonishing amount in just the last 120 years. Early 1900s, people ate, this is Americans, ate an average of 5 pounds a year. That's 1.5 teaspoons a day. Now, many people are eating 47 teaspoons a day. What? I mean, that is a huge increase. Most refined carbs lead to, are created, turned into sugar inside the body. That's why the emphasis on whole grains instead of refined carbs. So white rice, say goodbye to it. Instead, there's other delicious, there's brown rice, there's red rice, there's black rice. And again, those bright colored rices you might want to experiment with, they're full of antioxidants. They're like eating a vegetable practically. Now, the other thing, and I'll get into this more when we talk about cholesterol, but sugar is actually turned into LDL, the sticky type of cholesterol inside your body, and and it messes up your blood vessels. So it's not eating cholesterol, it's eating too much sugar. And most of you didn't know that. Now, how much sugar is safe to eat? We really don't know that for the brain. There are recommendations for the heart. So in the meantime, I adopt this. The American Heart Association says the maximum, this is added sugar, is 6 teaspoons a day of added sugar. That's about 24 grams. You could get that in 1 can of soda. Men, because they're usually bigger, usually get to have a little more. But the modest amounts of sugar in whole foods, such as fruit and root vegetables traditionally eaten by humans, is not a problem. So if you can reduce your amount of added sugar in your diet, and you'll see that it's in so many cereals, even unfortunately, many of the whole grain breads have a little sugar. So that may be your main source of added sugar because you want those whole grains. But you just really have to pay attention, cut out soda. It's not worth it. And candy, if you have any candy, make it chocolate, please. Anyway, what happens with the sugar, it increases insulin resistance in our very brains and messes up its functioning. It challenges your blood sugar metabolism throughout your body. Now, the thing you might not know, we talk about how important inflammation is, keeping inflammation inside our body and brains down. One of the most pro-inflammatory substances that is typical in our diet is sugar and the refined carbs that get turned into sugar. So it's so pro-inflammatory, it speeds up cognitive decline in the rate of Alzheimer's. It actually shrinks the hippocampus, which is those tiny parts and 2 sides of our brain that is the seat of our short-term memory and empathy. 2 parts of different parts of the hippocampus. And this happens, it's measurable even in teenagers who have developed, even if they're not full-blown diabetes yet. It's when your A1C is above 7, you start having problems with it shrinking your hippocampus. Excess sugar induces in both Alzheimer mice and humans memory deficits. We can measure this. It also has been shown to increase A beta buildup in the brain, as well as I said, LDL cholesterol. Now here's again a list of all the bad things sugar does in us. It's a lot. You know about, your tooth decay and gingivitis, but gingivitis in turn is one of the microbes under investigation to see if it's lurking in our brains to cause as one of the causes of Alzheimer's. It's not the only bacteria we're looking at. It may be multiple different kinds of microbes can do this. Because A beta is one of the slides we had to cut out. A beta is actually part of our innate immune system. And that's why when you do bad things or we're attacked by microbes, the A beta starts doing its thing. And if we have too much inflammation going on or other imbalances, it gets out of control and then starts hurting our brain instead of helping it. So the second, well, this is still on the topic of, okay, how do we reduce our sugar intake? This is looking at insulin resistance in general. So you're reducing your sugar intake, your intake of processed foods and refined carbs. Nitrates also aggravate your insulin resistance, and that's in processed meats. So what you want to eat more of are the foods that regulate blood sugar and help you out. And again, see here some of our friends we already talked about as antioxidant rich. Cinnamon, 1 teaspoon a day has been recommended, and it's really delicious. You can use it a lot of different ways. All different kinds of spices do that. Green tea helps you. Beans and lentils, nuts and seeds, fish and seafood, green vegetable, whole grains, and guess what? You could actually eat dark chocolate if it's 70% or more, dark, cocoa solids, up to 1.6 ounces a day, and it will actually help reduce your blood sugar. That's amazing, huh? I always like to give you a little bit of sweet good news at the bottom. Here's what, if you eat, so forget your milk chocolate, you can change your taste buds to appreciate those rich flavors of the dark chocolate. And it lowers inflammation, lowers blood pressure, lowers your LDL, controls blood sugar, fights cell damage, and improves your thinking. How about that? And the latest research is, by the way, now this is a slide about cholesterol. It turns out that you can reduce LDL cholesterol by eating less sugar and less saturated fat. It's not about eating cholesterol at all. Turns out eating eggs, especially if they're free range and rich in omega-3s, are perfectly fine and will actually help lower your bad cholesterol. So see, we're really learning things in the nutrition field. We don't know exactly how much saturated fat is okay for the heart or brain and whether it really does increase cholesterol, but in any case, we need to continue limiting saturated fat to the 10% of calories for brain health. As I mentioned, it's eating too much sugar and carbs. That's the real problem. And how that happens, it's what the liver does. It converts all excess sugar to this very fine particle, LDL cholesterol. It is the very type that sticks to the inside of your blood vessels, also to fat, which of course leads to weight gain. And why this happens, we're not going to change our bodies doing this because it's part of an ancient survival mechanism. In ancient times, there were only whole foods. There was none of this junk and pure sugar. And when you found fruit and it was ripe all at once, you ate a lot of it, and then your body turned it into fat so that you could live another day. The actual role of this very fine particle, LDL cholesterol, I don't think we really know, but in those days it did not endanger our health like it does now because of all the other things we're doing to challenge our body.
Dr. Emerson, next slide.
Yeah.
You have so much to teach us.
Yeah. So anyway, that's why the liver is involved in liver biles, and there's a lot we don't know about. This is a whole body disease, which some of you maybe didn't realize. These are some of the foods that help you lower cholesterol. Again, look at all of our friends. Healthy oils is one of maybe the new ones. And some of the food stars for doing this are avocado, grapefruit, salmon, cinnamon, and turmeric carrots and parsnips and other root vegetables, and hemp seeds. So there's a picture of our friend the egg. And then healthy fats. We're all fat heads. Our brains are actually made mostly of fat. But which fat we eat and the proportions really matters. It's not that you avoid fats. Fats are essential to health, and they make up every cell membrane in our body, especially our brain. So it's what kinds of fats. There are two that are good. Omega-3s, we need more omega-3s for brain health. For all these reasons, and the retina of your eye is almost pure DHA, by the way. And then there's so many sources of it. The foods rich in omega-3s are fish, shellfish, seafood, kelp, dulse, kombu. Those are different kinds of seafood, free-range eggs, green leafy vegetables, and purslane. So another reason, green leafy vegetables have so many good things in them. Vitamin E, lutein, and certain B vitamins. Canola oil is an okay source of omega-3s. It's part of the Nordic diet. Certain nuts and seeds, I've listed them here: walnuts, chia, flax, and hemp. Modest amounts even in raspberries and cauliflower. Now, the other type of really healthy fat are monounsaturated fats. You most know it in olive oil, but also in olives and canola oil, many different nuts, including peanut butter and peanut, avocados, and most seeds. And olive oil is a star in part, not only for the oil itself, but the antioxidants from the olives. So in addition to eating more of the healthy fats, and do that, eat more of the good stuff, and automatically you eat less of the bad stuff. You want to reduce the amount of omega-6s, and they're mostly found in animal foods and certain oils, like other vegetable oils like corn oil or soybean oil. So you really want to just eat more monounsaturated fats and omega-3s, and you automatically eat less omega-6s. I already mentioned reducing saturated fats. So again, here are some strategies. Eat less sugar, refined carbs, animal foods, and omega-6s, and eat more. These are the strategies for healthy fats. Again, you see the same foods we see over and over again. This is a strategy for cooling inflammation. And this is a slide you might post. Then there are certain vitamins. You can ask me about these if you want. These are the vitamins that are critical to brain health. Notice vitamin D is one of them. All the B vitamins. Vitamin E, it's not worth taking as a supplement unless you get a complex form that has all the tocopherols and tocotrienols. You can ask me about that. It's found in several different foods, but no one food has all of it, all the different types you need to eat. And vitamin C helps vitamin E do its job. Now, I want to touch just a minute here on the newer area is gut health. A lot of research is still going on here, so there's a lot we don't know. But it might be fun for you to know that in addition to eating, you've all heard about fermented dairy like yogurt, buttermilk, cottage cheese, regatta. And you might have heard that soy products are fermented, tempeh and miso, but not all of them. And then how about pickles? Did you know every type of pickle you eat, and they're part of so many traditional foods, we don't eat enough pickles anymore. Sauerkraut, dill pickles, cucumber pickles, kimchi, pickled vegetables. Just get them back into your diet. Maybe you grew up with them and stopped eating them. They're so full of flavor. And you don't eat the pickle juice though, because that's loaded with salt, but they're wonderful. Then every vinegar is fermented and is a probiotic. The only ones to avoid are rice vinegar. I would have that in limited amounts because they add sugar to that. And when you make your salad dressings, make your own with or look for ones that only have vinegar and olive oil or some other healthy oil, not sugar, because a lot of low-fat vegetable oils and salad dressings are loaded with sugar. You don't want a low-fat salad dressing. You want one with a healthy fat in it. And then kombucha, there's so many other wonderful probiotics out there, and their food. Probiotics are the healthy bacteria that you want in your gut to properly get the nutrients out of your food. Now, to keep your gut healthy, you got to feed those good bacteria, and that's called prebiotics. And what are these? Well, okay, it turns out they're types of indigestible fiber. You've heard of Metamucil and other things like that that some people eat to help their diverticulitis. Well, that's an example of a healthy fiber that the good bacteria use for food. But look at the sources of foods. This is, it's really amazing. There are so many healthy foods that were already on our list. And guess what? They're also prebiotics. Beans and lentils. They don't just keep you regular, they feed your gut. Every kind of bean and lentil. Leafy greens, especially dandelions. Inulin is a sweet tasting fiber that tastes really sweet, but it's not sugar and it's really good for you. It's a prebiotic. Every type of onion, anything in the onion garlic family. Leeks and others, they're full of this inulin. Asparagus, again, inulin, but there are other types of prebiotics. Root vegetables, maybe that's why they're so good in the African diet. Whole grains, the bran of grains and other seeds, fruits rich in pectin. So here's where your orchard fruits come in. They are loaded with fiber. Your berries, not so much, but then they have all the other good things, raw bananas and other fruits. So here's a list. And then your nuts. So it's really, there's so many sources of good, healthy foods. Now, we're in our closing slides. This really asked for this. I'm going to be posting this eventually on my brainwellness.com website by the end of the week, I hope, or early next week. It's under repair at the moment. But this gives you a summary of what we were talking about. It tells you how often you should aim to eat foods. So fish, I say at least 3 times a week. If you can eat it more often, any kind of seafood or fish. And if you want to keep the price down, you go to canned foods. Like there's wonderful canned sardines, tuna. One of my favorites is trout at Trader Joe's. Trader Joe's has very reasonably priced, excellent quality canned fish. And then you've got your poultry, your eggs, the red meat. That's you're going to be a challenge. Try to get it down to no more than once a week, less if you can. Red meat is pork, unfortunately, as well as lamb. It's not just beef. Beans and lentils, if you could eat it every day of the week. Could be peanut butter, could be a handful of peanuts. It doesn't have to be something, well, peanuts count as both a bean and a nut. So it's kind of a twofer. But again, try to eat beans and lentils, nuts and seeds very many times. Vegetables every day. And then try to do the leafy greens at least once a day. There's ways of helping yourself do it. If you cook leafy greens, you can eat more volume. The spicier ones, actually, remember I said something about flavor? Turns out any leafy green that has a kick to it, like watercress, arugula, mustard greens, have some of these really powerful antioxidants that are great for our brains. And if you're eating but spinach has also got great things in it, Swiss chard, endives, all of them have something to offer. All of the broccolis and things in the Chinese cabbage realm, there's 100 of them. If you don't like the flavor of a particular cooked green, then add a healthy condiment. I've worked with family members on this and it works. You can add vinegar. You can add even balsamic vinegar or mustard, or guess what? Hot peppers. So there are different ways to help yourself eat more greens. How do you start? You can't do it all at once. I say start with dessert. That doesn't mean start eating your dessert first. It means change. It means change your habits. try to use fruit instead. You want that little bit of sweetness maybe at the end of the meal. If you're used to it, try fruit. They're sweet. Then try, if you're having one of your favorite things that's just loaded with sugar and saturated fat, try a smaller portion. Sometimes you can savor each little bite, you know, make it last. Share it with 10 people. And then more or less often. And there are, again, some newer foods out there. I used Trader Joe's as an example where they've come up with different, sometimes they have granola in the title, sometimes not, but they have things made with hemp seed, chia seed, where they've loaded them with healthy whole grains, a lot of fiber, because you need that fiber, that's, think prebiotic, and very little sugar. So that can give you a little sense of sweetness without blowing your sugar budget. And then your snacks, look at trying to switch from sweet snacks to savory. Instead of having candy or cookies sitting out, put out nuts or olives, carrots, vegetables, avocado, you know, just Mediterranean foods like, anyway, use water instead of soda. If you've got to have bubbles, well, there's so many wonderful waters out now with fruit
Dr. Emerson,
flavor.
I want you to know we have a lot of questions waiting for you.
Okay, all right. So I think we're just about done here because I mentioned all the other. And yeah, I think those are just some more ideas.
Yeah.
And this summarizing, there's hundreds of delicious foods. There's many different kinds of whole foods diets out there to look at. And there's only a few foods you've got to start reducing that are dangerous. And summing up, eat real food, mostly plants and not too much. Michael Pollan. So we're done. And here's my website. There's lots of information there. You can text me, call me, email me, or go to my website, brainwellness.com. And there's recipes, articles you can download, and more. So questions.
Well, and what I'll do is while we're getting the questions up, everybody who wants the slides, I know I do. Susan Rowlett will put she's already done it, but if you can do it again, put your email in chat. Just send an email to Susan and you'll get all the slides. And that's just spectacular. And yep, and can we put
Nancy, can you stop sharing now?
Yes.
And then we can pull this chat up. This has just been spectacular. I'm going to start reading the questions to all. Let's see. Okay. Oh, some examples, please. What are examples of high glycemic index foods? And this is someone who asked, what is GERD? Someone else gave the answer that GERD is gastroesophageal reflux disease. But if you could answer the questions, what are some examples of high glycemic index foods?
Oh, well, they would be things that raise your blood sugar really quickly. So sugar, and then white bread, white rice, any kind of sweet dessert. And if you have saturated fat as part of the same food, it's doubly dangerous. But high glycemic means it quickly raises your blood sugar. So there's other foods that you don't hear about so much, like maltodextrin, which is often put into sugar-free foods for people in nursing homes. It's criminal because it raises your blood sugar even faster. So some starches also are very high glycemic index. So a good question.
Thank you. A comment and a question. There is increasing interest in plant-based diets, such as that promoted by Esselstyn and others for CVD prevention. His recommendation
for what
says,
prevention?
CVD.
Oh,
prevention.
cardiovascular disease.
Oh,
yeah.
right, I'm sorry. His recommendation says no oils, no fish, no dairy. You obviously disagree? Please
Yes,
comment.
I do. I've worked with several people over the years who were vegan or trying to be vegan. And the problem is it's really hard to get all the nutrients you need for your brain from a total total vegan diet. And one of those is omega-3s. The type of omega-3s in plants, in seaweed, it takes a while for if your body isn't working completely well, see, it has to convert the plant-based omega-3s to the animal version that's naturally in fish and even some animals. And it may not be working in you, and that might be you might have a genetic defect where your liver can't make that transition. So getting enough omega-3s is a big one, but there are other vitamins that are found in animal foods, like a lot of the B vitamins are in animal foods. So I think the main, if you wanted to go vegan, there are ways to do it, but you've got to really work hard at it. I guess that's a summary.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Do these nutritional recommendations apply to all types of dementia, for example, vascular dementia?
Well, I believe they apply to vascular dementia. They're all heart healthy, as I think Barbara said in the beginning. What's good for the heart is good for the brain. I think it goes the other way too. However, there's a lot we don't know about the whole range of dementias. Like many people I know have Parkinson's. And what's interesting is in families, sometimes people have Parkinson's in their parents' generation, but they have Alzheimer's, or their parents had Alzheimer's and they got Parkinson's. So there's many people with Parkinson's have Alzheimer pathology as well, but we don't know exactly. There's a whole other dietary concerns with Parkinson's that you have to follow to do your best. And people have told me, well, it can't hurt to follow because my program is really focused on Alzheimer's, but it's generally healthy for the brain and the body. It's based on general principles of brain health. It's just that some of them are focused on Alzheimer type pathology, which I've mentioned along the way.
Thank you. And
So
you used an expression, subpar diet. Can you explain what a subpar diet is?
If I said that, it would be SUBPAR, meaning
right.
an unhealthy diet. It's basically it's easy to describe as one where you're eating hardly any vegetables. Maybe you have one piece of fruit a day. Maybe you have no vegetables. Maybe you have one a day as opposed to 5 or 6. You practically never eat nuts or seeds, or all your grains are white, and you're eating lots of sugar. So and lots of dessert. I guess that would be an example. And lots of red meat and like hot dogs and processed foods.
There you go.
It wouldn't be hard.
And speaking of food, by the way, thank you on behalf of a lot of comments about dark chocolate. We're happy. And the question is on 2 different things. Can honey be a good substitute for sugar? And then the other question that came through regarding pickles, all the good that's there, but isn't the salt in pickle bad? You mentioned the salt, the juice is not good, but what about in the pickle, the salt? So
Well,
honey
okay,
and salt.
there are 2 different questions. Let me do the honey is the easiest. Unfortunately, honey is just about 99.9% sugar, and it's it's actually fructose. And fructose, when it goes to you have too much of it, goes to the liver, it's fructose that gets converted. It takes glucose, turns it into fructose, and then into your LDL cholesterol. So honey, if you're going to have, like, you limit your sugar intake, and you're only going to have, 4 to 6 teaspoons a day if you're a woman, and you decide you love honey so much, that's going to be your sugar, fine, but don't fool yourself, it's sugar. There are 100 forms of sugar. Some of my other slides list them. There's so many different names because the food industry wants to fool us, like dextrose. Anything with the OSE is probably a sugar. But back to honey, yes, if you have raw, natural honey, and one of my, lots of people I know actually are beekeepers, not lots, but several important people. And honey, it does have those extra nutrients that can help, you know, some people think with allergies, etc. But don't fool yourself, it's purely sugar, except for those little bits of nutrients. The same goes with delicious maple syrup. You take out the sugar, what's left are really powerful, wonderful antioxidants. That's the flavor, besides the sugar.
Great.
But you gotta really just don't fool yourself. It's sugar.
Thank you.
It's healthier than white sugar, but it's still sugar.
Thank you.
And then in cooking, if you're changing a recipe, I cut the sugar in half, and then you try to substitute something else for the rest of it. You can use non-sugar substitutes like stevia that are natural, or you can use coconut sugar, which it's still sugar, but it has a lower glycemic index, so it won't boost your blood sugar quite as good, and it's very sweet, so you need less of it. But I usually cut it with, you know, and then pickles, yes. So what you do is, again, if you're subject to high blood pressure, you have to control your salt. So what you do is you save your salt for certain things like olives and pickles. So, and some people like avocado, just cut it in half, take out the seed, put a little salt on it. But if you're eating salt in everything, you can't do that. So if you're avoiding your processed meats and you're either buying low sodium soup, or you're making your own soup, or whatever you cook, just don't add salt. Then you can have your salty treats that are healthy otherwise. So that's a long answer.
Thank you. And we have about 4 other terrific questions, so I'm going to go through them. Has there been any research, sorry, I lost it, on the Indian diet, which has so much spices, which has so many spices in it? The benefit of the Indian diet.
Well, no, yes and no. We have looked at, through Alzheimer's Disease International, we've been looking at rates of Alzheimer's throughout the world. And a lot of us thought that maybe India would have lower rates because of the great diet and they walk a lot. However, there are so many other issues there that affect brain health, such as in many provinces, low education or very problematic hygiene. So, but the Indian diet will be used in clinical trials. This worldwide study is going on of multimodal lifestyles for brain health. And in India, they will use the Indian diet. So I think the answer is yes and no, but there aren't any blockbuster clinical trials because people in India eat it, and people here, it might be hard to get people to totally switch. But look at the elements, the spices, the vegetables, the fruits, and they eat much more plant matter, really minimal, and you know, it's sacred. You don't eat cow, so there's no beef, but they might eat goats. So it's like you look at the elements and you know it's gonna be a relatively healthy diet, but there hasn't been the kind of blockbuster research that has been done on the Mediterranean.
Someone in our audience says, I have hemochromatosis and cannot eat greens. Any suggestions?
Well, then eat other foods that have lots of great things in them. So all the other healthy foods that I listed, especially I think some of the, first of all, they probably should be taking a vitamin E supplement of the type I recommended. There's more about it on my website. And I would also eat lots of herbs and spices. Now, some herbs, they might not be able to eat because they're, you know, like parsley and basil. I don't know if they can eat a little bit or none. I don't know that, you know, I'm not familiar with the disease, but I would eat all the other herbs and spices that don't, you know, aren't no-nos for them. And I would make sure I eat my nuts, my seeds, my lentils and beans, and all the other foods that are okay. Great. They're going to need extra omega-3s too because they're not eating their leafy greens.
Last three wonderful questions. Do you recommend supplements of D3?
Yeah, that's the vitamin D that I recommend. Yeah, it's the best
Okay.
form. And they probably need, in this climate, they probably need 4,000 to 5,000 units a day. Most people are taking only 1,000. You need at least 2,000, and probably, this is where you ask your primary, you have to ask, but ask them next physical to look at your vitamin D levels. We now can see whether we're deficient or not. But in general, up in the Northeast and Northern climes, you need 4,000 units a day during the winter at least.
Great. How about dried fruits like dates and figs? Is that good for us?
Well, again, in moderation. They are very sweet fruits, but hey, you can make some of your desserts instead of sugar. You grind up your, I have several recipes for that, as a matter of fact. You grind up either dates or figs, and that's your source of sweetness. And then you're getting all the wonderful nutrition. It's just, again, those are very sweet fruits. And when you eat dried fruits, again, that's your sugar. That's part of your sugar for the day when you eat a lot of them. If you eat just a little, like it was equivalent to eating a whole apricot or whole fig, you know, when it's not dried, then you're okay. But if you're eating a lot, well then just, okay, say, in a way, I got to eat less added sugar today because I'm really having a lot of baklava. Oh, there is the honey, you know. So,
Great. Great, thank you. And Dr. Emerson Lombardo, Margaret sends you a message. Hi, Nancy. Thanks for the great update. I last heard you at the ASA conference in San Diego. Thank you. And
That's me. May I ask, what do you think about the fish oil?
Fish oil, I'm a believer in. Especially, most people don't eat enough fish and seafood. And if you buy it from a good company like the Carlson Foods, they're manufactured right here in the U.S., you're going to get a good quality fish oil that's not, you know, has no problems. And then I often recommend a tablespoon a day of cod liver oil, which is an old-time favorite, has a little vitamin D in it. But
because my internal medicine doctor recommends the fish oil, 2 capsules for anti-inflammatory purpose.
Sure. And you can either take it in capsule form, or if you feel you have too many pills in your life, you can actually buy a bottle of liquid cod liver oil, usually lemon flavored, and it's manufactured in a oxygen-free environment, so it tastes fine. In the old days, it was rancid. People have nightmares about it, but modern days it's manufactured, so it really tastes great. And you could take a teaspoon or a tablespoon.
And Margaret, if you can email any question directly to Nancy.
Yeah, well, the other question I have is, you know, chocolate has saturated fat, so what do you think about that?
Well, the reason is, that's the reason we say 70% cocoa solids. Right. Because those cocoa solids, see, that means that only leaves 30% left for sugar and saturated fat. First of all, cocoa butter isn't as dangerous a saturated fat as some, but when you got 70% of the chocolate, these powerful antioxidants, it actually kind of negates the potential bad things of the sugar and saturated fat. That's why, again, 70%. Look at the label. It'll tell you 85%. Some people like it. It gets pretty strong tasting. But, you know, that's the principle. It's how powerful these good things are to help us still enjoy our food and be safe, both our heart and our brain. And great questions, Margaret.
Dr. Emerson Lombardo, on that note, that was a beautiful final comment, and I know that we could all continue. We want to continue for a few extra hours. So on behalf of my colleagues, I'm going to accept Dr. Emerson Lombardo's invitation to come back. And let me remind everyone that, again, you can request and receive from Susan Rowlett both the slides, and in about 10 days, the video that my colleague Chris has been recording will be posted. So we can all, and then as well, the website of Dr. Emerson Lombardo is filled with information and will be up by she said that the new version will be up by the end of the week. I enjoyed the last version. So we are now,
I'm going to just say the website is working. It's just in order to add additional material, I have to do some things. So by next week, the end of next week, I will have also uploaded lots of PowerPoint PDF versions and other articles.
I can't think of anything right now that I'd rather do than learn more from you. I am so grateful on behalf of our team. And, you know, I want to say that the way you have made very clear that what you're teaching is good for all of us, people with dementia and caregivers, all of us. And that's our goal and that's our mission. I am so grateful. I am also very personally inspired. I want to remind everyone that you'll soon be getting an invitation to our December program, which will be very special. On December 14th, we will be having a panel of 3 caregivers speak with you. And it'll be a lovely way to end 2020. Again, on behalf of a lot of people, Dr. You have inspired, you have taught, and we all have so much more we want to ask you. So be healthy, be well, and good night, everybody. Thank you.
And I'd like to add, in memory of my mother, Frances Fink Emerson, she had Alzheimer's starting in her early 50s and lived 25 years with it. This is kind of a shock for people to hear, but she was a wonderful person, and I do everything in her memory and to help the rest of us not have this happen and to slow things down. And for any of you listening who already have Alzheimer's, we want you to live a healthy, engaged life for the rest of the time that you have, because every moment of life is valuable. Thank you.